It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. End of the week, Wingnut Week in Review. And what a entertaining week it has been, with craziness, with insanity, and with really questioning what people have claimed to believe for such a long time. The interest this week for me is watching the right wing attack the military. Someone like Tucker Carlson attacking the Joint Chiefs, the Joint Chief of Staff, as a pig and stupid. I mean, it's really quite remarkable that someone who couldn't beat his way out of a paper bag is looking at a guy who would really cause him some serious damage just by sneezing on him. Quite amazing stuff. And to see someone like J.D. Vance, who tweeted out that I personally would like American generals to read less about white rage, whatever that is, and more about not losing wars. I don't know. I'm in this spot where you just kind of go, I don't know. I don't know if the guys who were the lunch money victims when they were in school should be really poking, someone like Millie. I don't know. And this is where you go, what is it that the Republicans are trying to do? What is it that the message masters are trying to say? What are they trying to convey to, their viewers and the minions, the faithful, when Laura Ingraham talks about defunding the military? And yet I don't hear those uber patriots who are waving the flag and saying how much they love the troops. I don't see them with any outrage. And this is troublesome, because you've got these really far out extreme people who've been extreme for a long time. But at least they were somewhat consistent in the flag, somewhat consistent in, the military. Those are sacrosanct to them. And you remember back during, when Colin Kaepernick, remember him when he was playing football and they were kneeling for the national anthem? Remember how horrible that was? Oh my God, I can't believe he won't stand for the national anthem. You now remember, these are the people who say, thank the troops because they give us our freedoms. You now have these people attacking them because they're woke, because how dare they want to understand what made thousands of angry white people storm the Capitol and the rhetoric that we hear every day. And look, it's out there all over the place. Fox News isn't even crazy enough. This, the whole thing with, and understand, I've been doing this a lot of years. And I've been fortunate to be in spaces. I shouldn't put it that way. Maybe I shouldn't put it that way. Not fortunate enough. I have been in spaces where Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham and the skinny one, Ann Coulter, Alex Jones. I've been in rooms and arenas with these folks. And I've always said, I seriously doubt any of them to their core believe what they spew. It's all about the rage machine. It's all about the red meat. It's all about getting people all bunched up and angry, because angry people listen. Angry people buy your crappy vitamins and do whatever you want them to do. Sign up and be in your 912 groups and Tea Party groups. They when you can convince them that someone's coming for something, especially if it's one of the others, if you can convince them that the others are coming for you and your children, oh boy, ratings go up. If you keep people afraid, keep them down on the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, you keep them scared, naked and afraid. If you can do that, you got loyal listeners. You got marching soldiers. And this is what they're doing. So I look at Tucker Carlson going, can you believe these woke generals and pig and stupid. What he's really trying to do is the old shtick isn't working. And this is where my mind is going in this moment. The old shtick's not working. The old rage machine just isn't getting the results. Because sadly, even further to the extreme is the new rage machine. And that's this OA1. These folks are way out. And I saw a clip today of one of their hosts talking about how the election, how a sitting president losing an election is a coup, which is weird to me because I always thought, never mind, we can have that later. But this guy's going on about, are there hundreds of people in this coup? The people who stole the election, even though there's no proof anywhere that the conspiracy that they're laying out, the big lie that they keep regurgitating over and over, actually happened. But it doesn't stop them because it's about ratings. It's about rage. It's about bringing people in and making money. This is what this is about. These people don't really believe this stuff. It's what's scripted for them. It's today's outrage. And it's meant to keep you, riveted to the TV and regurgitating their stuff and buying their books. But this guy goes on and saying, is it hundreds of people? Is it thousands of people who are in this coup? The people who evidently, with the Chinese bamboo ballots and, the Martian ships or whatever they, the guy who drove the truck of ballots all around New York City, those people who stole the election. And he goes on and he says, what we used to do with those people? We had a pretty good system for dealing with those traitors. And he went there. I'm going, no way he's going to go there. No way he's going to go to, we execute them. But he did. Now, stop and think about this for a second. The people who actually invaded our capital with the expressed intent of bringing our government to its knees and stopping the certification of a presidential election, those, in his mind, not traitors, not people who should be executed, but people who showed up, did their job, and did it well, but didn't come to the outcome that he wanted, those folks should be executed according to this gentleman. Now, I took some solace in the fact that a Republican congressman actually stepped forward and said, "Hey, this is a bit crazy. This is the kind of stuff that's going to get us killed." In fact, his name's Peter Meyer. He's a Republican from Michigan. He was elected to Congress in 2020. When the election was stolen, because remember, you had the Michigan Senate. Their report just came out, said they found nothing. There's nothing. Yet still wanted to go through all the voter suppression stuff. But he won an election in 2020. Amazing how that happens. He tweeted out, "Let me be clear. More people will die because of craven propaganda like this. When there are no arrests because this is all a lie, people are going to lose their lives. As they go through and look for the audits that are going to prove nothing other than more falsehoods, people are going to die. Because as this guy points out, here's the sad reality. As they find there's nothing there, and you still have people ramping up this rhetoric of there was a coup and the criminals got away and the justice system did nothing. What is that going to mean? Well, that's going to mean you're going to get these nitwits who are heavily armed, who are going to start to believe that they need to take justice into their own hands. Like the crazy people in Michigan who were going to kidnap the governor and try her for whatever crimes they had in their twisted little heads that she had committed. And they had planned on executing her because the rhetoric of people, like the dangerous rhetoric of people like this OA1, whatever it is. And you go, but they've got free speech. At what point do you start going, hold on, there's free speech, and then there's just out and out BS. and dangerous BS. The thing is, I look to this Republican politician, and there aren't many of them. That's the scary part. This guy is the exception rather than the rule. My congressman, Scott Perry, evidently found in a video here recently, calling Democrats Nazis, feeding into the big lie, feeding into the lie that, somehow the Democrats stole this. And they plan to destroy the country. They're traitors. This is coming from a sitting congressman. And I got to wonder, and this is one of those weird things, because Scott Perry, he ranked pretty high in the military at one point, somewhere near a general. He ranked pretty high. I got to wonder how he feels. Unless he's bought into, the military that I led is woke. Scary stuff. Now, the thing about Scott Perry was one of those people instigating what happened on January 6th. So if there truly is a traitor, Perry should look in a mirror. And maybe, here's a thought, maybe the OAN guy should look at Perry. Where does this end? I mean, this is the kind of craziness we've been seeing this whole week. And now you got Nikki Haley, who, again, Nikki Haley at one point wasn't insane, but now running around screaming, decrying the Democratic socialists and the socialist agenda, boycotting the Olympics, going on this screed because she needs to keep the outrage machine full. She needs to keep the base angry. She needs to keep them, wrapped up. So she's in Iowa doing her shtick. And still, it's not enough. It's not enough for them. And it makes me wonder, how much further does the insanity go? When do we say enough is enough? When do we stop? We can't even talk about critical race theory and have a discussion about what it is because, we can't have a discussion on what anything is. Because my grandfather always had a funny saying, if I don't know it, it ain't worth knowing. And that's kind of the Republican mantra right now. Give you a perfect example. Madison Cawthorn. Madison got elected purely on his looks. Good-looking young guy in a wheelchair. Probably got some sympathy votes because people thought he was in the military. No, he was in a car wreck after having a whole bunch of claims of sexual misconduct, but that's a whole nother thing. He was on the floor of the House, mocking people. He said, quote, "It was Thomas Jefferson that said, 'Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or our dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence. Let's cast our eyes over the facts, shall we?'" Yeah, let's start with the main fact. That was not said by Thomas Jefferson. You can't pick things off of Facebook and say that's fact. No, it was actually John Adams. So get that right from the beginning. And look, this is the interesting part of all of this. You got these folks who they did their research, had their mouth open looking at YouTube and Facebook. And as Reagan always said, there's so much that they believe that isn't true. We're really living that. Now, it comes back to our education system, right? Yeah, but here's the thing. As much as you want to scream about the education system, there is still some thought that goes into education. And maybe teaching people to think critically so that when they hear things, they can evaluate it and filter it through a series of thoughts and come to a reasonable place. Ron DeSantis this week, the governor of Florida, he signed House Bill 233. This is going to require public universities to put out a survey. Got to survey all the students and the staff. Got to do this every year so that they're able to assess their beliefs. They're able to assess, quote, the extent to which competing ideas and perspectives are presented, and whether students and faculty feel free to express beliefs and viewpoints on campus and in classrooms. Now, here's my thing. I know why they're doing this. They're doing this because the Milo Yiannopoulos of the world, I'm sorry, I butcher his name because I don't know it, conservative, flamethrower, who, people didn't let speak on college universities, campuses. I'm in favor of him speaking. But this is them saying, the liberal universities are destroying our education, while they're simultaneously saying we can't teach critical race theory on college campuses. Now, let me go back to what Ron DeSantis signed. They want to do a survey to see if people's beliefs and their ideas, competing ideas and perspectives, are presented. They want to make sure that competing ideas and perspectives are presented, like critical race theory. Now, understand, the goal in this is to starve the universities that don't comply with their belief structure. That's really what this is. The bill doesn't say anything what they're going to do with the surveys, but DeSantis himself has said there could be budget cuts, which means that if you don't do what the DeSantises of the world want, bad things could happen to your budget. Bad things could happen to your university. And this has been, just the kind of insanity that's gone on just a little bit this week. I mean, I didn't even get into Dick Morris, who was on one of the even a crazier station than Fox News, this Newsmax, who said, critical race theory is evidently, according to him, is going to make kids want to kill their fathers and marry their mothers. I'm not making that up. And the host went, yep, I can see that. We're talking crazy land. We're talking, we need mental health beds and we need them soon. So if you're a Republican at this moment, I ask you all the time, please take your party back to somewhere near sane. Throw these people to the curb. Let them start their wackadoodle party somewhere else. We got work to do. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1943. That was the day the Smith-Conley War Labor Disputes Act was passed. In the years before Taft-Hartley, it was considered the foremost slave labor bill. It gave the president the power to seize and operate war industries confronted with strikes or lockouts interfering with war production. It also criminalized any future strikes in seized plants with $5,000 fines and up to a year in prison. And it held unions in war-related industries liable for damages incurred if they failed to give 30-day strike notices. The law was passed just 4 days after miners struck in protest of a War Labor Board decision that denied all of their contract demands. Congress overrode President Roosevelt's veto in passing the act. But critics argued that FDR vetoed the bill over parts that did not go far enough to suppress strikes. President Roosevelt argued for a proposed amendment that would, quote, enable us to induct into military service all persons who engage in strikes, stoppages, or other interruptions of work in plants in possession of the United States. The bill effectively criminalized any worker that dared to defy the wartime no-strike pledge, even as wages and working conditions quickly deteriorated in the face of massive defense industry profits. Miners were outraged by threats of conscription and jail time if they dared to strike. United Mine Worker President John L. Lewis refused to comment on the act, but other United Mine Worker leaders lamented that the bill would hurt AFL and CIO unions. As far as the United Mine Workers were concerned, though, the bill wasn't worth the paper it was written on. The act expired in June of 1947. It was superseded by the detested Taft-Hartley Act.
Labor History in 2, brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the International Brotherhood of Teamsters wrapped up what is their 30th convention. And this sadly means the end of an era, as the current president, James Hoffa, retires after leading the union for 23 years. And while we recognize the end of what has been a great era, another one begins, as this week delegates to the convention passed a resolution that's going to focus on organizing the Amazon workers and those jobs of the future. And here to share some thoughts on, well, the organizing effort going forward, and also maybe look back over the last 23 years and some of the accomplishments of President Hoffa. I've asked Brett Caldwell to come talk with us. Brett's the communications director there at the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. Brett, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick, and thanks for having me on. It's good to speak with you again. It's been a while.
It has been a while, and I'm glad you took some time, because these conventions are always tough. I'm sure from your perspective as the guy who puts them together. This is your 5th one, right?
That's right. It's been. I got here about a month after Mr. Hoffa got here, and so I've been through all 5 of them with him. It's been a great experience. Yeah,
and this one probably more bizarre than the others, but as I understand the people I spoke to, you did a fabulous job.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I think I think all Teamsters are ready to get back in person, and our members are out there on the lines. They haven't stopped, and so I think the leaders very much want to be back and doing business in person and making sure that we're keeping moving back into a normal direction as best we can.
Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to spend a little time in is because President Hoffa is stepping aside. He's 80 years old. Time for retirement. Time for to see smell the roses, do some other things. But he has had some really good accomplishments in organizing and bringing the union back to some of the strength of the past. I mean, I think back to my grandparents' generation. The Teamsters were one of the most powerful unions in the country, if not the world. And I think he's done a really good job of bringing us back to that world of strength.
Yeah, I think these days it's really challenging to grow the labor movement. We know that through polling that people want to join unions. They want to have that collective voice, but between continual assaults on labor law and the sort of growth industry of corporate union avoidance, we continue to fight the decline of the percentage of members, of percentage of workers who are members of labor unions, and it's a real challenge. And I think that General President Hoffa, throughout his career, he's made organizing a priority. It's a constant treadmill, and in his time, we've organized close to 500,000 members. But that has really just allowed us to maintain the level of strength of where we've been throughout his tenure. But I think that if you look at some of the industries that he's really tackled, most notably the private school bus industry, where we've organized about 50,000 private school bus drivers, and we now have a national agreement with First Student. We have a national agreement with Durham. And we are seeing, workers slowly improve with each contract their wages and benefits. And in fact, our First Student contract, which we've just negotiated and is expected to be ratified next week, will include for the first time national health care coverage for our school bus drivers. And people say, well, school bus drivers, that's a low wage, a low income type of job. It's almost like a part-time job. That's what I think how the general public views it. But these are folks who transport our kids, and we want those to be professional jobs. And when Jim's dad was an organizer in the 40s and 50s, truck driver jobs were those low-wage, disrespected jobs that nobody really cared about. And he brought a whole, generation of workers into the middle class. And I think there you can see some real parallels between the work he did with truck drivers in the 40s and 50s and what Jim has done with school bus drivers and with port drivers and with intermodal workers. And you just, across the board, you have workers who are seeing their lots in life improve because they've done outreach to the Teamsters, and the Teamsters are there to help them achieve what they want to in the workplace.
No, you're absolutely right. And in fact, I've spent my entire working career working under the National Master Freight Agreement, and it was something that my grandparents' generation, my grandfather actually worked on, a contract that's been in place since 1964. And in fact, I keep a couple copies on my desk here as a reminder of what a contract can do for an industry and for workers. Because I've always said the simple bumper sticker is union job, better life. It is that simple.
Right. Well, and with you being under National Master Freight, and you've seen the challenges that happen with pension plans. I think that a lot of people these days don't understand that the problems that are really have multiplied among pension plans go straight back to government policy and deregulation by Jimmy Carter in 1980, and then the subsequent continued growth of anti-union sort of corporate behaviors has led to challenges facing those plans. But one of the greatest things that's happened in the last 3 months in the United States is that the American Rescue Plan saved pensions, not just Teamster pensions, not just Central States Pension Plan, but 250 pension funds from around the country, different unions, 1 million workers are going to be sure that they have the retirement that they not only deserve, but that they earned, and that they defrayed those wages into their pension plans, and that they did everything right. And that's because of Jim Hoffa. And so one of the great things about this is his dad created Central States in 1955, and Jim Hoffa helped save it in 2021. And it's just, it's one of his biggest achievements. And the nicest part of it is it comes in the twilight of his service to the union.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know a lot of people who are, so grateful that this actually got done, because here at the end of their lives, when they were expecting the pension to be there, sadly, because of, as you pointed out, the policies that have destroyed an industry that when I started was 85% unionized, and now it's down into the maybe 10-15% range. Because of deregulation, because of the horrible policies that have allowed companies to bust up unions and deny workers their ability to join and form. This is a sad situation that a lot of workers find themselves.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
So, which brings me to the next part of this, because obviously, as the era of President Hoffa ends now, whoever the next administration will be, they've got major challenges. And one of the things that this convention did come up with, and one of the things that came out is a focus on Amazon. And look, Amazon's the great destroyer of what will be any future middle class jobs, in my view. And I've been telling all my friends at UPS, if you want to keep your good family sustaining wages and your excellent healthcare benefits and retirement, Amazon's where we got to focus, because they're destroying everything in their path.
Yeah, I think if you really take a look back at the behemoth that Amazon is, they really are an existential threat to every middle class worker in this country. I mean, it's not an overstatement that they are trying to change, practically every industry, whether it's the way we shop, whether it's the way we receive deliveries, whether it's the way goods are transported across the world, not only the nation. They're trying to do it all themselves. And what the result of that is the sort of pinching off of the ability for workers to have a say in their workplace, because you can't, we have to be able to stand up to multiple companies and hold them accountable, so you can have good employers and bad employers, and show people what it means to be a good employer. And Amazon is the worst of the worst, and they're really trying to take over the world. Yeah. The union, the Teamsters, have been, really talking to, Randy Corgan. I believe you spoke to Randy earlier this week. Is what I heard. I'm not sure.
Yep, we had a great conversation, and I'm thrilled that his focus is on returning to a culture of unionism and community organizing, and the kind of things that he was talking about, I think, are desperately needed.
Yeah, and that's right. And I think that, and Randy's really put together a program here, and he's been working on it for a long time with Teamsters from around the country and really showing what member engagement is required to happen, customer engagement's needed to happen, and all the types of things. Everybody knows you can't, Amazon's not going to just let you walk in and just start organizing people. This is a bigger effort. This is a cultural shift in how people look at and utilize Amazon in order for us to be successful. And it's a long-term plan, that's going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy, a lot of coordination to make happen. And, what was really great about the convention this week is, Randy and his team, and the team's very big, have been working on Amazon for, well more than a year, a couple of years. His local in San Bernardino County, he's been doing this for multiple years. And his initial, and what's really interesting is, Randy's initial foray into this had to do with the fact that he represents public employees in San Bernardino County, California. And the tax breaks that Amazon was demanding were so harsh that they would affect public funding and how public employees would be able to receive wage benefits or ensure that their health care was protected. And so he took on Amazon from that perspective of what is the impact on the county, and as they come in and try to bully the elected officials around what Amazon wants and sort of demand givebacks that the union was unwilling to go with. And he's had a lot of success with that.
Right.
But I think that what he's done is he's developed a program that transcends any internal politics, and it shows that the Teamsters Union, no matter what is happening, we have an internal election, but, we are all Teamsters at the end of the day, and his program is showing the world, and Amazon in particular, that we are united, we are prepared, we are strong, and we are going to take them on. And we're going to do it in a smart and effective way.
But this is one of those things, Brett, that when you look at as a whole, do you think the Teamsters are going to be able to go this alone? This is one of those things that I think we need to be building, mass movements over. This is what I think, I don't think any one union themselves can take this behemoth on, because look, Amazon spent $200 million keeping a very small union, our WDSU, out of the Bessemer facility. $200 million. They don't seem to run out of resources.
No, no, absolutely. This is not a solo effort, and it will not be a solo effort. Jim Hoffa, one of his great achievements was the establishment of what is now the Strategic Organizing Center, where we have unions collaborating together from the CWA and SCIU and the farm workers and the Teamsters and the AFL-CIOs involved in any number, the UAW, any number of unions who are engaged in real organizing are joining together to share, a strategic vision and resources in order to be effective in these types of large, ongoing campaigns. And we've seen that whether it was the Fight for 15, whether it was the Walmart campaign by UFCW, whether it's the McDonald's campaign with SEIU, or the janitors campaign that they had, 17, 18 years ago, that we have to work together and collaborate across these industries in order to be effective and to share strategies
right.
and successes.
No, it's most certainly something that I'm hopeful for. But ultimately, it's going to come down, in my view, and you can help correct me if you think I'm wrong. Politically, we've got to get our heads screwed on right. We've got to get politicians who are going to move legislation that's going to make it a lot more helpful. Because, look, sadly, the reality is we're in a union density level somewhere in the private sector of where it was when it was illegal to be a union member and yellow dog contracts were still the law of the land. To me, everything comes back down to the laws on the books and the political aspect of this. And, unions are right now in kind of a divided territory, it seems.
Yeah, and that's what's really challenging is as the nation is divided in this sort of political stalemate in Congress and in Washington and in state legislatures, where people are missing the point that the vast majority of Americans want to be able to join a union. And it crosses party lines. When the Teamsters, we just fought and stopped right to work once again in New Hampshire, and that is a bipartisan effort. We had a lot of Republicans who supported us and helped stop that, because we have a lot of Republican members who, believe in trade unionism and are going to stand up and fight for trade unionism. And that happened in Missouri. That happened just a couple of years ago. It happened in Montana. And we have to be able to transcend those partisan lines in order to be able to speak for all workers. And I think that we're seeing a few successes with that, but we do have to achieve more success. And when it comes to companies like Amazon, this is more than just, these strategic efforts also, are going to address how companies like Amazon, or Amazon specifically, is able to operate in a monopolistic manner and continue to push their way into and through industries and take them over in a way that the government is going to at some point have to step in and handle.
I absolutely. I've been saying for a long time we need to use our antitrust laws early and often. They've grown too big already. Last question I've got for you. We've got about a minute and a half left. When you look back at your time, and as you said, you've been a part of this administration almost from the beginning over these last 23 years. What do you think the legacy is going to? When you look back, what do you think the legacy is going to be?
Well, I think that Jim Hoffa, has really you know this even better than I do, Rick. You're a Teamster member. You were there. You've been there for a long time. Is that when Jim Hoffa got here, the union was inherently broken, and he put aside all differences and brought people from all sides together, rebuilt our strike fund. We have $300 million in our strike fund. He rebuilt the finances of the union. He got the government. He ran things right, got the government out of the union. We renegotiated NAFTA. We, saved pensions. I mean, the list of accomplishments just goes on. And what he's most proud of at this point is to be able to say that we are, handing off to his successor, whomever that may be, a union that is on strong footing. And I think that is really something, very, very proud for him to be very, very proud of.
Absolutely. No, you're right. I've been a member for over 30 years, and the International has gotten stronger. The finances have gotten better, and whoever wins in the upcoming election will inherit a much better situation than President Hoffa got. But Brett, I appreciate you taking some time for us. As always, great talking with you, and congratulations on a great convention.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
Good stuff. Our good friend Brett Caldwell, Communications Director of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1893. That was the day that the Haymarket Martyrs Monument was dedicated at what is now the Forest Home Cemetery just west of Chicago. The Haymarket Martyrs were 8 men convicted of throwing a bomb at a workers' rally in Chicago during the 1886 fight for the 8-hour day. The men were sentenced, although the prosecution had no evidence specifically tying these 8 men to the bomb. Some of them were not even present at the time of the explosion. 4 of the men were hung, 1 died in prison, and 3 were still incarcerated at the time of the monument's dedication. Lucy Parsons, the widow of martyr Albert Parsons, led the statue effort with the support of the Pioneer Aid and Support Association. The monument was designed by sculptor Albert Wienert. It includes 2 bronze figures, a woman depicting justice holding a fallen worker. At the base of the statue are inscribed the last words of one of the martyrs' August spees. The day will come when our silence will be more powerful than the voice you are throttling today. The dedication of the monument was timed to coincide with the World's Columbian Exposition taking place in Chicago. Thousands of workers marched or took a train to the outskirts of the city to attend the ceremony. Today, the monument stands as one of the most sacred sites of labor. Many other labor and social justice activists are buried or have monuments near the statue. Today, the Illinois Labor History Society maintains the monument. Each year, visitors from around the world come to the cemetery to pay homage to the workers who gave their lives for the cause of labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
The good news, the Department of Justice is suing Georgia over their Senate Bill 202. Fortunately, not going to have to sue Pennsylvania because our governor is going to shoot down the same kind of idiocy that our Republican legislature just pushed through. In fact, House Bill 1300 passed the Senate on a party line vote, and it's what you'd expect. All the Republicans, saying, we're going to ram this through. So much for the talk of bipartisanship. But I'm sure that the governor, Tom Wolf, will veto it. But what it does is it limits the opportunity for counties to use drop boxes, no drop boxes. It gives less time to register to vote, requires voter ID. In fact, 2 forms if you want to do it by mail. Requires signature verification with no training or standards on what that looks like. Also, less time to apply to vote by mail. And then creates several election-related audits under the Auditor General. And that ought to be fun. It also limits early voting. So a lot of the stuff you see in Georgia and elsewhere, but fortunately our firewall, our governor, that's not going to happen. But here to talk a little bit about what's going on in Georgia. In fact, his claims 364,000 people illegally under attack in the state of Georgia because of Senate Bill 202. I've asked Greg Palast to come talk with us. Greg's an investigative reporter. He is the vote guy at this point. Everything I need to know about vote theft, Greg is the guy to tell me, and that's why I've asked him to come back. Greg, thanks for taking time for us.
Glad to be with you again, Rick. Interesting times. By the way, it ain't so totally wonderful in Pennsylvania. For one thing, I just found out that the state of Pennsylvania is about to join a nasty purge program called ERIC, which Wisconsin dumped after I did an investigation, found out it removed mostly students and black people. And so the state of Wisconsin dumped it despite its Board of Elections. Despite it being in law passed by the Republican legislature there. So look out, your Secretary of State may be jumping into a purge program that you don't want. It's ugly, it's racist, and it goes after voters of color, especially if the color is blue.
Yeah, see, this is the weird thing for me.
So let your governor know that that they're heading in that Georgia direction, because, by the way, only 4 states are joining this program this year. Georgia, Texas, Florida, and Pennsylvania. So do you think that you should be in the same bucket as Texas, Florida, and Georgia? I don't think so.
No,
Get out of there. Get your governor to find out what's going on.
Yeah, we most certainly need to do that. But I'm sure that there are those who want us to be right there with Georgia and Texas for insanity. Now, I want to go to this thing that you've
Yes.
come out with. You're saying 364,000 Georgia voters legally under attack because there are 88 operatives, as you call them, who are challenging their vote because of Senate Bill 202. Walk me through how this is possible, because I don't think people are getting it.
It's okay. So if you saw the film yesterday, I went down to Georgia. It turns out under SB 202 in Georgia, which was, Republican party line vote law signed by the governor, which today, by the way, the Justice Department said it's going after parts of the bill, not the whole thing. It's a bit of a disappointment, but let's see what happens next. But part of the bill that's hidden, that the Justice Department didn't even notice because it's so subtle, is that there's a line that says that any voter can challenge a, quote, unlimited number of other voters. Unlimited. Now, what does that mean? What do you mean challenge another voter? In some old Jim Crow states, they had a law that said that one voter can say, I know that voter's not legal. Take them, don't let their ballot count. That's an old Jim Crow thing. You know, some white farmer says, old black Joe there, he shouldn't be allowed to vote. And so they would throw away his vote. Well, that was the Ku Klux Klan operation, but we don't use white sheets anymore. They use spreadsheets. And what happened was that a group out of Texas called True the Vote, right-wing freaks out of Texas, gave a list of 364,000 voters to Georgia operatives, almost all of them Republican officials, who then are right now, as we speak, challenging the right to vote of 1/3 Georgians. And what I did was I found the challenger in chief. Her name is Pamela Reardon. If you saw the film yesterday, in fact, go to gregpalast.com. You can watch this film, gregpalast.com, and you'll see Reardon challenged 32,000 people. So I challenged her. That is, I went to her home. She invited me in. And she's running for vice chair of the Georgia Republican Party. She's Marjorie Taylor Greene's candidate. She'll probably win. She's a Republican official right now. She challenged 32,000 people in her county, Cobb County, a suburb of Atlanta, to stop them from voting. Now, my team called about 800 of these people on her list, and they're all giving us the same story. This woman says they don't live in Cobb County, and we're reaching them in Cobb County. We're going to their homes in Cobb County. What the hell is going on here, Rick? What's happening is it's a phony job. It was created by this list, and this woman, and none of them, but I spoke to her directly. I said, I showed her a picture of one of the women that she challenged, a black woman named Tamara Horn. And it's important to know that she's a black woman because the list is filled with black folk. So I said, do you know Tamara Horn? No. Do you recognize this photo? No. Did you ever call her? No. Did you ever write her? No. Did you ever go to her house? No. Then why did you challenge her right to vote? She challenged her right to vote. Then I even got another guy, his name is Storm Saul. I said, well, why'd you challenge Mr. Saul? Here's a picture of him on his honeymoon. Why'd you challenge his right to vote? I don't know. I don't know him. So why'd you challenge his right to vote? By the way, maybe you want to tell him why. I actually put him on the cell phone. Now, this is all while the cameras are on. So I said, why did you challenge him? And I said, did you know, because I took this list and I took this to the ACLU and the NAACP. The ACLU was horrified. They thought that they had stopped this challenge. They first tried to make this challenge in December, just weeks before the runoff election between Ossoff and Warnock, with Ossoff and Warnock and the Republicans. There's no way the Democrats could have won if this challenge succeeded. But the ACLU thought that they stopped it. They sent letters to the counties. You can't challenge voters within 90 days of an election. Well, what the ACLU didn't know is that these guys waited 90 days, and they'll say, we're taking them out now for the next election because Warnock is running for re-election next year and Stacey Abrams for governor, and they know they can't win unless they wipe out these Democratic voters. So I confronted her with her phony challenges. She admitted she never checked a single one. And then she started saying, get out of my house, which is okay. I wasn't going to stay because she had a shotgun next to the door, loaded guns with ammo boxes on a table between us. So I wasn't going to mess around, Rick. And then she started screaming, you're all a-holes. And she started using, here's this woman dressed like Nancy Reagan, very elegant, high heels.
And the thing that shocked me, Greg, is, I always thought Canadians were nice people.
Oh, yes, that's the other thing. I said, so then I went to the NAACP, and they said, oh, my God, we thought we'd stop this. He says, this is a violation of the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. You go to jail for this kind of mass intimidation of black voters. That is a go-to-jail crime. So I said, do you know about the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871? And her response was, I'm Canadian. What? She kept saying, and I said, you don't know what the Ku Klux Klan Act is? You don't know the Georgia law or any of this? She says, no, I'm from Canada. It's like, what? But it turns out later I found out that she did become a citizen in 94. But, she's literally doing a go-to-jail crime. But it's not just her. It's 87 other GOP operatives. In fact, the chairman of the Republican Party, Rick, of Cobb County, the chairman in her county, added another 16,000 names to the challenge list. It's horrific. If you knock out these voters, basically the Democrats can't win. And even though they've, think about it this way, Biden only won Georgia by 12,000 votes, Ossoff by about 100,000. You knock off 1/3 voters. Good night.
Yeah,
I mean, that's bad news.
No,
And
so let me get back to this woman then,
go
because clearly, as you've laid it out, it's a crime, and I've wondered that. I mean, these are religious, and as I said yesterday, these are religious people, who most of them, most conservatives I know who are preaching this stuff are religious folks who want those 10 rules plastered everywhere. Isn't bearing false witness one of those rules that you shouldn't? Lying, isn't that part of the 10 rules? And isn't that a crime? And shouldn't someone go to jail for this? And shouldn't we be locking these 88 people off and maybe taking their right to vote away?
Well, if they go to prison for this felony crime of violating the Ku Klux Klan Act, she won't be able to vote here or in Canada. and so all I'm telling you is, it's a crime. And you're right. It also breaks another law so that there might be kind of an eternal sentence. That's the other thing is these people really don't mind lying. Now they'll say they didn't lie, but come on, you look at a list, you get a list from some right-wing group in Texas. You don't even bother to make a single phone call. Yeah. I did. I spoke to Tamara Horn. They know who they're removing. If they were removing members of their country club, believe me, that wouldn't be happening. They know who they're removing. So now you brought up this. Don't want to check.
You brought up this group, True the Vote. Obviously, one of these groups that are funded by billionaire money. There's a lot of this dark money out there pushing into this stuff, which is why, for me, the January 6th commission, that isn't going to happen. I want to see them go into who funded all of this stuff and who funds groups like this to put this in this poor woman who is clearly not the brightest. Put this idea in her head that somehow she's saving the country that she has now found and loves, and she's saving the vote, and she's saving democracy, and she truly believes that she's some uber patriot because they've convinced her. You're doing God's work.
Behind them. Okay, True the Vote. We've been tracking them. The Palast Investigative Fund. Again, you can go see the film at gregpalast.com, and there's a write-up which says who's the money. True the Vote is this group out of Texas we've been watching for 5 years. It's a split off from the Tea Party, but they are loaded. They've gotten millions and millions of dollars from two sources, mainly the Bradley family of Wisconsin. These are the new Kochs. They've spent $2 billion on right-wing causes, and they're concentrating quite brilliantly on attacks on voters. And they're not only doing it in Georgia and in Texas, but in Wisconsin, where that's when I was telling you about that ERIC program. They're the ones that got behind that. And they're still in court suing to enforce this wipeout of innocent voters. So I was doing that investigation for Black Voters Matter. But let me tell you, so I was in Milwaukee and tried to confront the Bradley Foundation. They're hiding from me. But yeah, these are billionaires behind this game. And I got to tell you, that's the big danger too, because not only do they have, and by the way, this woman's lawyer, this is not small stuff. The Bradley Foundation is paying for James Bopp. James Bopp is a superstar lawyer he's the guy who argued Citizens United and won the Citizens United case, allowing people like the Bradleys to spend their billions on burglaring our ballots. How about that for a BBB?
I like that one. Because that's really what it is. I mean, they're literally stealing. I mean, it's one thing to lie. It's one thing to, to do the whole bear false witness thing. But this is literally stealing, 364,000 people, as you've pointed out, their right to vote, their right to participate in this experiment of self-governance.
Well, Rudy Giuliani lost his New York law license yesterday for lying about the election. Why doesn't James Bopp lose his law license for defending what he has to know is a massive racial attack on the voter rolls? I'm very concerned, by the way, that the Justice Department, this is in the new 202, SB 202 in Georgia, that Justice has not taken this on. In part, I think one of the things that they're doing is taking the low-hanging fruit, the worst crap in the SB 202, the easy stuff to knock out, like limiting, like they're trying to do in Pennsylvania, limiting the number of drop boxes, extra ID to ask for an absentee ballot, difficulty in getting it cast. No food can be given out in these 5-hour-long lines in Georgia. I would like to see them say this whole bill is nothing but Jim Crow, and it's got to go.
So, but I go back to it, and I look to the Supreme Court and John Roberts, who, in my view, a big part of why we're seeing all this insanity, that they basically gutted the Voting Rights Act, and now this is what we get, more of this kind of Jim Crow era legislation.
Well, the one really good thing, actually, to me, the most important thing in the lawsuit against Georgia by the Justice Department is that one of the things that they are asking is that the Section 2 and 5 of the Voting Rights Act be restored for Georgia. When the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, and they said there used to be something called pre-clearance. You couldn't mess with procedures unless the Justice Department said, yeah, that doesn't discriminate against people of color or your age, your religion, or gender. That's easy to do. In fact, New York City, believe it or not, was under pre-clearance because they used to block Puerto Ricans who moved in from voting. That stopped. But New York City said, this is no big deal. We send a letter to the Justice Department saying we're changing a procedure, and we never get a problem because we're not trying to stop black people from voting.
Yeah, we're not shutting down all of the voting districts, the voting polls in a certain county.
It should be national. So now the Justice Department has asked that pre-clearance be returned to Georgia alone, to start there, and that's a big step. That would begin to bring the wall down if they can get the Supreme Court not to step in their way. But the Supreme Court did say, while we're removing pre-clearance from the old list, if you have a state that's running out of control, you may reimpose it. You may ask a court to reimpose it. That's a big step. So understand, while I can say that I'd like to see more from the Justice Department, just remember, it was less than a year ago that we had an Injustice Department where Bill Barr, the Attorney General, basically had lawyers, and I kid you not, this has never been done in U.S. history, where lawyers were on one side of a voting rights case, literally picked up their briefcases and walked over and joined the other side to oppose voting rights. Yep. It's never happened in American history where the Justice Department switches sides in the middle of a case. Never happened until Trump.
There you go.
This is a refreshing thing. Merrick Garland is the real thing, and the head of the Civil Rights Division is fantastic, Kirsten Clark. So I'm hoping for more.
All right. Good stuff. Hope people will check out the website, gregpalast.com. Make sure you check out the video. It's fantastic, especially the part where the woman loses her mind and throws you out. Loved it. Greg, I appreciate the time as always. Good stuff, my friend.
You're the best, Rick. Thank you.
Appreciate the time. Our good friend Greg Palast. Seriously, gregpalast.com, the website. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break. Right back.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1938. That was the day President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Fair Labor Standards Act. The night before he signed that landmark act, he addressed the nation in one of his famous fireside chats. He explained to the American people the significance of the measure he would sign the next day. The president declared, except perhaps for the Social Security Act, it is the most far-reaching, far-sighted program for the benefit of workers ever adopted here or in any other country. Without question, it starts us towards a better standard of living and increases purchasing power to buy the products of farm and factory. The act set the standard of the 8-hour workday. The fight for the 8-hour day had been a long, hard-fought cause for labor. The act also set a minimum wage of 25 cents an hour. Upon its passage, some 700,000 workers would be eligible for this minimum wage. It also restricted the use of child labor and set a 40-hour work week. It took considerable effort to get the act through Congress. It underwent multiple compromises and revisions. Labor Secretary Frances Perkins, the first female cabinet member in U.S. history, was a champion for the measure. The president recognized that there would be complaints over the measure coming from business. In his fireside chat, he warned, "Do not let any calamity howling executive with an income of $1,000 a day who's been turning his employees over to the government relief rolls in order to preserve his company's undistributed reserves tell you that a wage of $11 a week is going to have a disastrous effect on all American industry." Since 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act has stood as one of the most significant bedrock laws for American workers.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. It's time for The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on our Friday panel. The week that has just been insane. The top stories of the week, we're going to bang around with our all-star panel. The Chauvin sentence that just came out, 22 and a half years, 270 months in jail. I would have liked to have seen more, but we'll get to all of that. The Wingnut Week in review and everything top to bottom with our all-star panel. Our good friend Rich Ojeda from No Dems Left Behind, Scott Dworkin from the Democratic Coalition, and Eliza Orlins, a former Democratic candidate for district attorney in Manhattan. Everyone, thanks for taking time for us.
Everyone, glad to be here.
So let's start with the Chauvin trial. Eliza, let's start with you. 22 and a half years, is that enough?
Well, listen, 22 and a half years is a very long time for someone to get sentenced. But as someone who has spent the last dozen years as a public defender, I've represented people facing life sentences. I've represented people facing life sentences for as little as stealing a jacket or taking someone's wallet. And so the fact that, he committed murder on video and received a sentence of 270 months was, I think, a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people.
Now, is this the most he's going to get? Because this was only on the most serious of charges, which was the second-degree murder. There are other ones, I guess, that are coming along. Will those charges add to what he got, or is this it?
If this were in New York State, then any charges that stemmed from the same conduct would be concurrent sentencing. I'm not exactly sure what the state law is and whether he could get consecutive time. But I understand that he has other charges pending that have nothing to do with the Floyd murder. So I think it's certainly possible he could end up with more time.
Yeah, Scott, let's go to you. Thoughts on the sentence?
I'm not a lawyer, so I'm going to be really biased here, but I'm going to say it's not enough because I just, my understanding is that he's facing more potential years. So hopefully it's tacked onto that. I think, I don't think that to be straight, I don't think any kind of sentence would have been enough because, George Floyd's dead, Chauvin's alive. What I found really just grotesque today was his statement, which was just weird. It sounded like a QAnon member where he's like, there'll be other things coming up. What are you talking about? You were fighting for your life here. You put everything out there. There was nothing left. There's no other evidence. And he didn't apologize. He didn't even express remorse in any way. And, even worse, you have his mom going out there acting like their family is a bunch of victims. I understand that they're affected by this as well, obviously. She didn't even mention George Floyd or, his daughter or his family. And it's just it shows to the heartlessness of a lot of it. And I know that I'm sure that his attorney said, don't mention him. It probably was intentional. But I'm just saying, there was a lot of heartlessness in there, and I think that it goes back to the core of the case, and it shows his mom kind of showed why he was so ruthless. I mean, I just found it to be detestable. Like, a lot of it was just disgusting.
Yeah, I saw his that's supposed to be where you go, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Whatever excuse you're going to give to make the judge feel sorry for you and give you a lighter sentence. And he turns to the family and says, soon there's going to be information that's going to give you peace of mind. I'm going, what peace of mind could you possibly give this family with any new information after they've seen the video? Rich, jump in. What are your thoughts?
I just watched the interview with George Floyd's daughter, and that was just absolutely heartbreaking. And you can tell she's still not at the age where she grasps truly what really took place. 22 and a half years is a long time, as Eliza said. But, I think one of the big things is, and I hope that police officers across this country are starting to wake up and realize that the days of qualified immunity need to come to an end. It's time for people to be held accountable for their actions. And 22 and a half years seems like a long time, but when you go back and you look at the lack of even feeling when they were with their knees on George Floyd's back while this man was crying for his mother, it should have been 40 years. It should have been 45 years. He should never see the light of day. And I hope that, these other police officers that were standing right next to him that watched that happen, I'm hoping that this doesn't mean that they're only going to get, 3 to 5. They all participated and stood while, George Floyd drew his last breath, and they all need to be held accountable.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's horrible and it's tragic. I hope he spends a good part of those 22 and a half years behind bars. I want to move on to the other big story of the week, which, Rich, I want to start with you because I sat and I watched General Milley answer the question about critical race theory and how, this attack on the woke military by someone like Matt Gaetz, who I'll tell you, my first thought was, who the hell is Matt Gaetz? To question this General Milley. When I grew up, and maybe it was the same way someone like Milley would have just grabbed him and twisted his little pencil neck geek head off. It's just one of these weird moments.
Yeah, make no mistake about it. Matt Gaetz would never, ever approach General Milley in a room by themselves with no cameras and run his pie hole. That's a guarantee. General Milley is a special forces. He's Ranger qualified. This guy has got multiple years of combat experience, as does General Austin. When Matt Gaetz started asking those questions, at the end of the day, the military, I spent 24 years serving in this country. And that's one of the great things about the military is it really doesn't matter how you pray. It really doesn't matter who you love. I don't care what it means. All I'm saying is if you're to my left or you're to my right, all I care about is that you have my back. That's it. As long as you got that, then we can move forward on our mission. And I loved the way General Milley laid it out, talked about how, we want to know what caused all these people to attack our Capitol and try to destroy our Constitution. That's important. What made them so angry? What makes all these rich white people, some of them who've flown in private planes to Washington, D.C. to assault our Capitol? I want to know, and as he wants to know, why that happens. And I think that's important. And people like Matt Gaetz and Laura Ingraham, they all talk about how they support the veterans until a veteran challenges them, until a veteran questions them, and then they immediately go on the attack. Tucker Carlson is already trying to drag General Milley through the garden. And let me tell you something, Tucker Carlson's life cannot even begin to even scratch the surface of the service that General Milley has given to this nation, his family. He's spent years away from his wife, his children's in support of this country, and it's a shame when you see people like Tucker Carlson, Matt Gaetz, and the rest of them throw stones.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that they're throwing the military under the bus. You had Laura Ingraham saying that she wants to basically defund the military now that she believes it's woke. You had you had Tucker Carlson calling General Milley a pig and calling him stupid. It's a very bizarre time, and it kind of reminds me as a kid, growing up, in the Cold War era. I had always wondered, what it was like during the hysteria of the anti-communist era. We're seeing this kind of just the bizarre moment. Eliza, let's go to you. I want to get your thoughts. I mean, from a legal standpoint, at some point, these words, these attacks on these folks, there's got to be some recourse, no?
Absolutely. And I think that there's so much that really we've seen. There's so little accountability. I mean, I think that actually the first topic and this kind of tie together quite well, because we see that there are certain people in this country who get to operate with impunity, who don't face repercussions for their actions. And that includes police officers, but that also includes, the people who the insurrectionists who attacked our Capitol on January 6th. So many of them were not subject to pre-trial detention, are not really going to face any consequences for this. The same way in which, even though, yes, we saw a substantial sentence for Derek Chauvin today, but so many police officers face no accountability. The people who murder Black and brown people, who terrorize, harass them, who do these things, who say things to people who have served our country. I mean, all of this kind of ties together in that there are people in this country who would rather just sit around and call something woke and, not actually take any accountability for their part in systemic racism, in the way in which these things have really been fed and occur now on the regular because of the way in which they're just allowed to get away with things.
Yeah, it's incredible to me. Now, one of the first thing that General Milley said in his response when given the opportunity to basically address this question was, he said, a lot of us have to get much smarter about what critical race theory is. And my first thought was, is that him going, as a society, we do need to get, much smarter about this, understand what it is? Or was it directed at Matt Gaetz going, you don't even know what you're talking about? Because, everybody I ask, they don't have an answer for what critical race theory is, but they know they're against it. They know to be afraid of it. They know it's the grievance candy. It's the anger candy. But they don't actually know what it is. And Scott, I look at this and at some point, this is just one more of those things that the right-wing spin machine has created to enrage the base, to get them all wadded up in the panties and angry in the eyes without thinking.
Yeah, critical race theory is the new boogeyman. It's the new Antifa. It's the new catchphrase. It's their new, whatever. As Joy Reid pointed out on her show this week, it was very clear that it's not even taught in schools. Like it's something that's taught in college courses, like in law school or something. Apparently, it's not like in our elementary schools or like. So it's a fake epidemic, and people are already protesting about it in schools and causing a lot of problems with their white rage. What I find so detestable here is blindly attacking our military and blindly defunding our military. This is lunacy, and these are the traits of only traitors would say things along these lines. And again, I've always taken that word very seriously, and just, you can't attack our military like this. You are attacking America when you're doing so. When you're doing it in a public forum blindly like this, you have to assume that you are working on the behalf of a foreign power or working on behalf of somebody who is anti-American like Donald Trump. And it's just low. And I think that we're not going to be able to dig ourselves out of it unless folks like Milley and others, like Rich, speak out. Veterans and people who are active duty speak out against this and confront it, and don't let them do this. Don't let them treat our military, because just like Trump treated the Gold Star families and with Mr. and Mrs. Khan, we can't just stand for this. And I hope that the president speaks out against it. I'm not sure if he has. I didn't see that yet.
I haven't seen anything yet. But Rich, let me go back to you, because I want to step back from the outrage, because I was never in the military, but I have the utmost respect for people who put on the uniform and have served this country. I keep coming back to why. Why is it that the people who have draped themselves in the flag, for so long, that they're the ones who are, they've claimed that they're the party of the military, they're the party of national defense, they're the ones who every photo op opportunity they get, they're there. why in this moment do they think it's in their interest to go and attack the military? Do they think there's a division somehow that they can exploit so that maybe we can kick a bunch of people out? I'm trying to figure out the why.
I think this is something that they've done, and I think that they really didn't want to go down this path. Understand, when I become an officer in the United States military, I was a sergeant, and then I got a Green to Gold scholarship. I actually had to go to a historically black college. That was actually the rules back then. And the reason for that was because of the future officers in the military, especially one like myself that has this skin color. It was important for me to find myself engulfed around people that were of color so I could learn from them, because without a shadow of a doubt, when I become a young lieutenant, I would be leading people of different colors, race, creeds, and things like that. And the military has always been pretty, that has been a very important piece about our military. I really don't think that they wanted to go down this path. I think somebody stuck their foot in their mouth, and it's not going to end well for them. You can't sit and scream and speak negatively about our military and expect that to go over well. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, see, but here's where I question that, is because I believe everything that Tucker Carlson says. Fox News has approved. I don't think that they're going to let him go out and call Milley a pig and say that he's stupid if there's not something that maybe I give them too much credit for having an agenda, but I'm a little
unless they're trying to realize that they're now going to have to double down with this.
Yeah.
But didn't they double down years ago when Trump, called people who were prisoners of war losers and suckers, or when he called veterans. I mean, I think the doubling down already happened. I mean, remember when he took that trip to France and he didn't want to visit the cemetery where American military service members were buried during the commemoration of the 100-year anniversary of the end of World War I? I mean, there were so many times where they've disparaged our military. It feels like this is a almost natural extension. It doesn't feel like this is something that's sudden or new.
Well, you may be right, but at the end of the day, Donald Trump is just a pure selfish human being. That's what it is. I don't think that anybody, I can't sit and think right now that Republicans are sitting back thinking, yeah, we really want 4 more years of this guy. I really don't. It's hard for me to wrap my head around something like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, there's no win in this. You're not going to be able to attack our military and be able to get away with it with the clean slate. It's not going to happen. I don't know if somebody just made the wrong mistake, but I'm going to tell you right now, challenging General Milley, challenging the Secretary of Defense, General Austin, is not the way to go. You're not going to win, and that's an absolute fact. Both General Austin, when he was a colonel, was the colonel of the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 82nd Airborne Division. I was attached to the 505th during that time. That guy is a solid leader, solid.
Scott, you got the last word here.
It's different when Trump was in office. He gave them cover. They don't have that cover anymore. And I think losing that cover makes it so that they expose themselves for who they really are. So I think Eliza was right in that respect. And so that's my feeling, is I think that they definitely stepped in it here. But you're right, Eliza. This has been the road they've been traveling down for a long time now. But they don't have Trump as a cover anymore. And so that blows everything up in their face.
No, I absolutely agree. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this, we'll pick it up on the other side. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1943. That was the day the Smith-Conley War Labor Disputes Act was passed. In the years before Taft-Hartley, it was considered the foremost slave labor bill. It gave the president the power to seize and operate war industries confronted with strikes or lockouts interfering with war production. It also criminalized any future strikes in seized plants with $5,000 fines and up to a year in prison. And it held unions in war-related industries liable for damages incurred if they failed to give 30-day strike notices. The law was passed just 4 days after miners struck in protest of a War Labor Board decision that denied all of their contract demands. Congress overrode President Roosevelt's veto in passing the act. But critics argued that FDR vetoed the bill over parts that did not go far enough to suppress strikes. President Roosevelt argued for a proposed amendment that would, quote, enable us to induct into military service all persons who engage in strikes, stoppages, or other interruptions of work in plants in possession of the United States. The bill effectively criminalized any worker that dared to defy the wartime no-strike pledge, even as wages and working conditions quickly deteriorated in the face of massive defense industry profits. Miners were outraged by threats of conscription and jail time if they dared to strike. United Mine Worker President John L. Lewis refused to comment on the act, but other United Mine Worker leaders lamented that the bill would hurt AFL and CIO unions. As far as the United Mine Workers were concerned, though, the bill wasn't worth the paper it was written on. The act expired in June of 1947. It was superseded by the detested Taft-Hartley Act.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it looked like there was going to be a deal. Yesterday there was a deal. A big announcement. There's a bipartisan infrastructure bill, $1.2 trillion. I think they said the number was, and we were going to do some things on transit, some roads and bridges. None of the stuff that, on elder care or electronic vehicles or all the things that were going to move us into the future. No, just the hard roads and bridges and stuff like that. But we need it. Hey, today, well, it seems maybe not so much of a plan coming out of that. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the infrastructure issue. Do we get a plan? Do we get something that's going to help us get something done? That's why I've asked our all-star panelists to stick around. Scott Dworkin from the Democratic Coalition, Rich Ojeda from No Dems Left Behind, and Eliza Orlins, former candidate for district attorney in Manhattan. Guys, thanks for sticking around. So let's talk infrastructure, something we desperately need. Eliza, living in New York, something absolutely you guys need, transit especially. Thoughts on this, on the development so far?
So listen, we absolutely need infrastructure. We need investment in so many different aspects of infrastructure. But I think that what we're seeing, maybe a half step forward, but then it's multiple steps back, and it would make the climate crisis worse, prop up freeways and oil and gas powered grids rather than building new green infrastructure. And so, in a lot of ways, this is extremely disappointing.
No, I have a bunch of friends who are saying we're not going to get anything. This is just another Republican plot, to gum the system up and run the clock out, and that we need to do away with the filibuster. And from your perspective as an attorney and someone who deals with process and all of that, do you ever see us getting rid of this arcane rule?
Oh God, I hope so. I mean, it's so long overdue that we get rid of the filibuster. Even at its inception, it existed for a completely different purpose, and now it's simply being used to be obstructionist and let a small minority of people overrule the will of the majority. I mean, it's horrible, and it's being used to disenfranchise people, to not enable us to protect people's rights. And it's going to be even more dangerous with the way in which the Republicans have packed the Supreme Court already.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying the Democrats better get their butt in gear and start putting some people on the courts, because we need to do that desperately. Scott, you want to jump in on, do we get something, do you think? Or do you think this is just part of the stall, delay, and run out the clock?
I mean, their delay tactics are backfiring big time. And you can start with the insurrection and how there was going to be a bipartisan commission where they'd have some control over what was happening. And instead, they were like, oh, well, no, we don't want the deal that we brokered. And now they have a select committee being formed by Speaker Pelosi and will be run by her. So, good luck. If you thought Benghazi was invasive, welcome. welcome. We're going to know every single detail about every single phone call and text, any kind of communication that people had leading up to January 6th, all the planning meetings and everything that was going on with the Flynn's. We'll be able to subpoena people, including Trump and Pence, Mark Meadows and others, and senators and House reps. And I think that in the other scenario, it wouldn't be that way. Now with infrastructure, I think the big thing that here in DC that's really been shown is that something can be brokered in person on a bipartisan scale without many games. Like, it's straightforward, as in, here's a deal that we've brokered together. And I think President Biden doing that is very good sign for just some things. Now, if they are doing this to stall, I know for a fact that Democrats have a plan. They assume that that is the game plan on the Republican side. And that will backfire big time again, especially with this having to do with money. I have a pretty good sense that they're going to be able to get around this and be able to pass it with 50+1, or at least massive parts of it. So I think that all of this, their games are backfiring, and I don't think they want to play with this fire. But again, that's a big win for just America overall, to have them all in the same room and have them come out united as a bunch of white people that are standing there. It was not a diverse crowd that day. But I will say that it was good to see, even though it was too small. It's not what we wanted, and it's basically, it's not as expanded as we would like. But I think we'll get there. But like I said before, we need to go for like way beyond what we dream of, and then negotiate down, do the Trump style negotiation.
No, I'm right there with you, and this is where I've given Biden credit. He has done what Democrats in the past haven't. He's set big goals. He's gone big, and then if he needs to scale it back, they've done a little bit, but not much. And look, for me, Rich, it all comes back down to West Virginia, because a lot of these problems come back to your guy there.
Well, understand that Joe Manchin, what he did and what he does is he looks to make sure that the Republicans have enough to win, and then he'll go back and vote the right way, as long as he knows they have enough to kill it. Right now, the Republicans don't want anything to get done. I got it. Okay, yeah, we got something. It's not what we wanted, but we got something. I don't think we have it yet. Because as far as I'm concerned, I believe that what the Republicans want to do is they want to stall, they want to play out the clock, and then in 2022, they want to stand up and say, look, man, the Democrats couldn't get nothing done. They're not going to say it was because we obstructed. They're just going to say the Democrats couldn't get nothing done, and you guys need to elect us so that we can. Make no mistake about it, if the Republicans get back to power, and they can, they will kill the filibuster, and then they're going to force feed us everything. Mitch McConnell had the gall to come out and say that the filibuster has nothing to do with racism. For 90 years, the filibuster was only used for one reason, and it was basically to obstruct anything that was beneficial to people of color in this country. They did everything in their power to fight voting, everything. It is absolutely it's a shame what we have going on right now. And I think that the Democrats got to stop playing with pillowcases and start punching back. The Republicans are ruthless, and the Democrats are acting like a bunch of church boys. And they need to stop that. They need to get dirty too. I guarantee you that's the only thing. You may think that we got something. Within the next 2 days, it's going to fall through, because the Republicans are going to make sure that it falls through. Yep.
No, and look, McConnell said his job is, stop the agenda, and that's what they're doing. But Eliza, you've been on the campaign trail. You ran a fantastic campaign. You were out there talking with people. People are struggling. Things are tough right now. And this is where I think we need a big infrastructure bill that's going to come with a lot of investment and the jobs that come out of that investment to help people make it through.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, we need to make sure that the Democrats are actually making changes happen. If the Republicans were in this position, they'd be shoving every single thing through. They'd be packing the courts, not just the highest courts, but at every level. They'd be changing. We see this happening in Georgia, in Texas, in places where they do control the state legislature, they are then changing rules to make it harder for Democrats to win in those states. I mean, think about, I know we were maybe going to talk about the new Georgia rules where you can't even hand out water to people standing in line at a polling place. I mean, all of these things are the systems operating as designed, and the modern filibuster is working as it always has, which is, to perpetuate these racist policies, to block, legislation that would actually protect voting rights, that would enfranchise people. And we need to abolish the filibuster. We need the Democrats to really step up and do the things that we're counting on them to do, why we fought so hard for Georgia, for a Biden presidency. And, we really need them to protect our rights.
Yeah, I've often said the Senate is where progress goes to die, and they've used the filibuster to do that. And look, on labor rights they've used it too. Bob Dole filibustered the strike replacement bill that Bill Clinton had ran on. The only reason I voted for Bill Clinton is he said he would sign strike replacement, and Bob Dole filibustered that. And we've never had any labor law reform in this, at least in my lifetime. Which again, this is where I'm going to. We need things. We need it desperately. We need to be making people's lives better now, because come 2022, if they're not, Scott, I know we may disagree a little bit, but I think there's a bloodbath if things don't get better.
You should see the plans that Democrats had privately before, and this is after private pushback. And I would say less public on our part. It was paltry. It was not good in regards to investigations, and I think the momentum is starting to come here because we've had some time to get our feet. I want to remind ourselves that we've been getting vaccinated. We've been taking care of our families. We had the insurrection happen. We had a guy try to overthrow our government. We're really working hard here. All this is spread too thin, and now it's starting to coalesce a little bit. But really, like the plans before were just not good. Now, in regards to the filibuster, I think that don't act like this little speed bump here is like the most. It's like a glorious device that is supposed to be bowed to, and it's supposed, like, I guess it would be something like an icon or a relic where you're just sitting there and you're praying to it. Oh, thank you, dear filibuster. I love you so much. You are what we depend on as a country, and you define everything about America. Wrong. It is a procedural device that doesn't need to exist. It's not in the Constitution. It doesn't exist anywhere else. It was obviously used for racist tools. And I'm really, what I got to remind Democrats is we won, act like it, and bring your swagger, because we have it. It's there. It was there from 2008 till at least 2010. And then we brought it back in 2012. But I would say, like, really, we're in leadership now, and we need to act like it. I will say, though, that Republicans are doing everything that they can to make sure that they lose the House and then lose some more Senate seats. And so I am thankful for that. But we're not going to do it without success. Right. I think COVID's not going to be enough because people will forget.
Yeah, and the good thing is people are getting vaccinated. I'm sure, Rich, you saw the story of, the people who are dying now of COVID are basically people who didn't get vaccinated. I think there was a very small number of people who have passed who had been either in the process of being vaccinated or had gotten there, like a handful. Now it's overwhelmingly, it's virtually everybody who's dying had the option to get vaccinated and chose not to. And I'm of the mindset, good riddance.
Natural selection. But I'm going to tell you, I honestly, as much as I can't stand, because everybody knows insurance and everybody pays insurance. But, right now, I can honestly say this is the first time I've thought, you know what? I hope the insurance companies looks at every single person that is in the hospital that failed to get vaccinated and telling them, we're not going to cover your costs. That's on you, because the vaccinations are free. We're getting now, obviously, if it's like these kids that are just now getting them and they haven't gotten them, that's a different story. But the rest of these people out here who have failed to get vaccinated, as far as I'm concerned, they deserve to have to daggone sell everything they own to pay their medical bills. I don't care.
No,
I think it's garbage.
Because there's no excuse for anyone in our age groups. There's no excuse for you not to have been vaccinated.
No, people are dying. You have people, and there's a lot of people that didn't get vaccinated that are cancer survivors and stuff like that. I have a sister-in-law, but they finally gave her the thumbs up to get the vaccine, and she did. She's a cancer survivor. But other than that, get vaccinated. 615,000 Americans have lost their lives. Millions across the globe have lost their lives. This is not a hoax. When I see these people that are these QAnon chuckleheads, that they're talking that. Hey, you know what? I'm like, I hope they get it. Survival of the fittest. The kid who eats the most marbles doesn't grow up and have kids of his own. Good to go.
Politely disagree with Richard, on the fact that I'm different just as a human or whatnot. It's sad. I think that some of the people who convey these lies should have to pay for it.
I can understand that.
So it's a mix of it. I don't want anybody to get it. I don't want anybody to get sick. I've had these conversations with former QAnon members and people that don't believe that the virus is real or it's a hoax, or they'll say it was made in a China lab, and I say it doesn't matter where it came from because it's here. It doesn't matter because it's killed people, and it's killing people who don't get vaccinated. So I'm not exactly sure how to really talk people into it at this point. And it's just, Rich is right. It's sad that it's been led down this path because it's been politicized. I've spent the last 10 weekends now talking about waffles and burgers and fries and what are your food preferences to have non-political talk about getting vaccinated. And it's just like, I don't think we should have to go that far. Like, everybody should be united in this effort. There should be no people that are like, oh, don't get vaccinated. You're killing people when you say don't get vaccinated. When you, it's just straight to the point. And I think when the smoke clears on this, people will be held accountable, and politicians will be held accountable for their words and actions and leading people to their death. Because I think, and Eliza would know this, I've always thought that people should be held accountable for like negligent homicide or something along the lines of where they're accountable for people's deaths, because I think epidemiologists can actually link deaths directly back to Trump and others and their words and actions and their rallies. And so like people should be held criminally accountable. And I don't know, obviously, I don't know if that's even a possibility.
I think Trump absolutely should. We know dereliction of duty, but once again, even though he got vaccinated, remember, right up until the election, he still said, after November the 3rd, you're never going to hear about this again, insinuating that this was just nothing more than a hoax.
Yeah, listen, I'm with you, Scott. I think that there definitely should be liability on the part of the people who are out there perpetrating these harmful lies. I know a few people, not very many, almost every single person I know is vaccinated, but the people who aren't, the reason why they express vaccination hesitancy is not because they want to die, because they want to get sick, because they want other people to get sick. It's really because they have fear, and that fear was imparted upon them by, the Fox News and people who are out there spreading misinformation and lies. People who are saying things like that it's not a big deal, or worse yet, that the vaccine itself is dangerous in some way or can make you sick or, does something. I don't think I know people who think it implants a chip in you, although that is something that's been spread as well. But the really scary thing is that with this Delta variant that we're seeing, the transmission, it is so much more contagious. The transmission can happen in 5 to 10 seconds. Like a fleeting moment, they call it.
No.
And, people are dying at very high rates when they contract it, and exponentially more so if they're not vaccinated. But I think it's less than 1% of people who've contracted the Delta variant version of COVID who are vaccinated are dying. But still, people are dying. It's unfathomable that people wouldn't just be rushing to get this vaccine at this point.
just amazing to me. But again, it is the power of misinformation and disinformation and what the right wing has gotten away with. We're going to take a quick break right here. Guys, I hope you'll stick around through the break. On the other side, voter fraud. We've actually found it in a couple of cases. And surprisingly, it's not exactly who we're told it is. Quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1893. That was the day that the Haymarket Martyrs Monument was dedicated at what is now the Forest Home Cemetery just west of Chicago. The Haymarket Martyrs were 8 men convicted of throwing a bomb at a workers' rally in Chicago during the 1886 fight for the 8-hour day. The men were sentenced, although the prosecution had no evidence specifically tying these 8 men to the bomb. Some of them were not even present at the time of the explosion. 4 of the men were hung, 1 died in prison, and 3 were still incarcerated at the time of the monument's dedication. Lucy Parsons, the widow of martyr Albert Parsons, led the statue effort with the support of the Pioneer Aid and Support Association. The monument was designed by sculptor Albert Wienert. It includes 2 bronze figures, a woman depicting justice holding a fallen worker. At the base of the statue are inscribed the last words of one of the martyrs' August spees. The day will come when our silence will be more powerful than the voice you are throttling today. The dedication of the monument was timed to coincide with the World's Columbian Exposition taking place in Chicago. Thousands of workers marched or took a train to the outskirts of the city to attend the ceremony. Today, the monument stands as one of the most sacred sites of labor. Many other labor and social justice activists are buried or have monuments near the statue. Today, the Illinois Labor History Society maintains the monument. Each year, visitors from around the world come to the cemetery to pay homage to the workers who gave their lives for the cause of labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, yeah, there was some voter fraud found. You know that mail-in ballot stuff that the Republicans are all crazy about, and people cheating on it. And I've always said the reason that they're so hung up on people cheating is because they're cheating. And yes, a guy named Ed Snodgrass from Ohio. He's a trustee in Porter Township, Ohio. Evidently, the day his father died, he requested a mail-in ballot and then forged Dad's name because he was just doing Dad's final wish. And then obviously did his own ballot as well. I'm waiting to find out what happens to him. Will he get a slap on the wrist? Oh, here's probation. Don't do it again. Or is he going to get like 5 years like the woman who did in the last election because she made a mistake? Going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I'm here to share some thoughts on, well, the insanity of the partisan right-wing hackery going on in states like here in Pennsylvania, where they've just passed House Bill 1300, going to meet the governor's veto. In places like Georgia with Senate Bill 202, our all-star panel of commentators, Scott Dworkin from the Democratic Coalition, Rich Ojeda from No Dem Left Behind, and our good friend Eliza Orlins, former candidate for Manhattan District Attorney. Guys, thanks for sticking around.
Airborne.
Get vaccinated.
So voter fraud, it exists. We know, Eliza, we know it exists because we keep catching them.
It is such a minor issue. Is something that happens almost never. But what does happen all the time is voter suppression. Is the disenfranchisement of so many people. And usually that's Black and brown people. So, these ideas that voter fraud is occurring on some massive level that's being spewed by, members of the GOP while they simultaneously enact things to suppress the votes and purge from the voter rolls hundreds of thousands of Americans, so they can't vote. And these are people who would typically, vote for Democrats, is despicable, and they should stop the lies.
No, but it's interesting to me though that when we do find those rare cases of voter fraud, it's always Republicans. I mean, we got one here in Pennsylvania, did the exact same thing. Decided, well, we're just going to take some ballots and we'll write some people's names on it. Yeah, no big deal. And because they think they've been sold this idea that everyone's doing it, so they can get away with it too, and then surprise when they get caught. Rich, I'm sure you've heard that before. I mean, everyone's doing it. Those Democrats cheating with their mail-in ballots.
I mean, we've already heard at least about 10 cases across the United States of America where voter fraud took place during this election. And I don't think I have heard one where it was Democrats that were breaking the law. It was, dead people voting for Donald Trump. It was people taking absentee ballots and things like that. I mean, look, like Eliza said, it's really a non-issue. And the voter suppression is the biggest. I love the fact that Merrick Garland has now come out and said that they're going to go after all of these horrible voter suppression bills. And that's the problem that we have in this country. And that's why I keep telling people we can't wait for 2022 to find out. If you are of color, and I mean light brown to dark brown, African American, Latino, Hispanic, you need to find out right now exactly what is the qualifications, what are the requirements of being able to cast a vote, and you had better go get that now. They've already thrown out things like your housing project identification for voting in the next election. So, and Eliza, being from New York, knows having a car in New York is a luxury. Most people take the train, things like that. That's all they have. So they don't have driver's licenses. And if they're going to require that everybody has to have a DMV identification, then people need to know now and go secure that now. Because if African Americans vote, we win. There are over 20 million more registered Democrats than they are Republicans. Republicans are not pushing anything that should motivate people to come to the polls. They're just throwing garbage lies. So I believe that, I think that as long as people know and they're proactive, we can win this.
Yeah. So nationwide, we found a handful of, I think maybe 10 cases of voter fraud that are being prosecuted, and I'm sure they're all going to get slaps on the wrist, like the guy here from 40 Fort, Pennsylvania, who got caught as well. But to Eliza's point, my friend Greg Palast, the investigative journalist, uncovered what he calls an illegal attack on 364,000 people in Georgia by 88 of these operatives who are challenging voters who they don't know, they've never met, they've never spoken to, they've never seen. But yet, because of Georgia's Senate Bill 202, they have the ability to challenge these 364,000 plus people, claiming that they don't live where they are, and could potentially have them tossed off the voting rolls just because they believe. This is how screwed up our laws have gotten, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, voter fraud is, I guess it's starting to run rampant because you have, but at least some people are facing consequences for it. I guess it would be election fraud more than voter fraud for Rudy Giuliani, and why he got suspended was overall for fraud, for lying in court, lying in public, misrepresenting himself. Now Georgia's getting sued. It's going to be one of many states, I assume, that get sued over that. I'm not sure what judges would choose in that kind of case. But I would just say that, it is, again, something where they're making these accusations of this widespread fraud, but the people who are actually committing the fraud are the Republicans. And it's sad to see. We saw that extensively in North Carolina. Obviously, there was a huge, and even in that case, I don't think it really swung the election. I can't remember. It may have. But it's really hard to cheat at that level. So, the way that they're doing it now is by cutting off different routes for people to vote and making it harder for them to vote. So they're deterring them from voting. And I think when it's that negative, when it's that intentional, I consider that to be voter fraud, because they should not make rules to prohibit people from voting that are Americans that have the right to vote.
Well, Scott, we should be really careful about saying fraud in that circumstance, because I think that conflates the issues, because it really is just stealing the right to vote from, American citizens. Like I think calling it fraud is it's problematic, because the reality is what they're doing is just, it's racially motivated. It's targeted. The DOJ, I read a portion of the DOJ complaint, what they filed with regards to the very restrictive SB 202 in Georgia, and what they're saying is not, they're going above and beyond what they would actually have to show, which is just that the impact is that it disenfranchises, Black and brown people disproportionately. They're not saying that, and that's all they would need. Merrick Garland has gone way above and beyond that, and he is literally saying they are doing this in order to. It is racist in intent, not just impact. It will be racist in impact as well, but we saw the number of people who requested absentees. They put the percentages in, the number of people who are Black and brown who requested absentees in Georgia, and that is why they are, stopping the ability for people to, get absentees and have drop boxes and reject late ballots and everything that they're trying to do to suppress the vote in Georgia.
No, and none of this stuff is new either. You go back to Paul Weyrich, the guy who co-founded the Heritage Foundation, and his statement back in 1980 to a bunch of Baptist ministers in Texas, saying, do we want everyone to vote? No, we don't want everyone to vote. Our power goes up as the voting populace goes down. If you can suppress others, the others, they win. And they've been doing this for decades now. You go back to 2000 when you had a bunch of people, 90,000 people purged from the voting rolls because we thought they had names that sounded like felons. In 2004, you had the caging. 2008, they couldn't steal. 12, you had a whole bunch of other shenanigans that have gone on. And now you've got voter ID. You've got all of this, questioning of people's where they live, voter signature verifications, all of this stuff to make sure that they can challenge and steal any election they want.
Yeah, that's pretty terrible. And what Eliza, what would be a better way to define what they're doing as in a more simpleton's way, like that I would understand?
I go with vote theft.
Yeah, vote theft, voter suppression. Just they're taking away people's right to vote. It is your right to vote. The standard for taking it away. I think everyone should be enfranchised regardless. I think that it should exist. The right to vote should exist, whether or not you have been charged with a crime, convicted of a felony, whether you're incarcerated at the time, whether you're on parole, no matter what, it is a fundamental right to vote, to choose who your elected officials are. And so I don't think we should be taking anyone's right to vote away, regardless of their circumstance, especially in these situations that we're seeing, which is just deliberately trying to disenfranchise people of color.
Tell me one time where a white community woke up on election day and found out that their polling station was closed. You're not going to find that. That only happens in areas of color. And, that's another thing where when you're talking about the rules and the regulations, there should be rules and regulations that state that polling stations will not be closed. They will not be moved unless the people in that area have at least 2 weeks notification and know exactly where the next one is. African Americans wake up, go to the polling station and find it closed. They get away with that stuff. And is it illegal to do that? I guess it's not, but that's exactly what they're doing. They're disenfranchising people of color to vote.
It's the little things too, because one of the things we noticed in Georgia, we caught them doing this multiple election cycles where they forgot in highly black districts, highly voting black districts, they forgot the plugs, the AC outlets for the voting machines. And so it's like, oh, well, we have the machines here, which is legally what we're supposed to do, but we forgot this, so we got to do it all by paper. Or I think people actually had to vote at a different place, and most of them probably didn't at that point.
Yeah.
Eliza, I was curious what you were saying there. Do you think that they have any chance, that the DOJ has any chance of winning in Georgia?
Yes, I really do. But the thing I think people don't realize, because people are so excited seeing that this was filed, and I think the thing that people don't realize is that the wheels of justice turn very slowly. So even if the DOJ wins and is able to overturn some of these, voter suppression laws in Georgia, there will be elections between now and when that happens. And so these laws will actually be in effect and will suppress votes between now and then, because even if a good decision comes down, it will be appealed. There's a whole process. And so this is something that is going to take a significant amount of time to do, and especially now they're saying they're going to do it in all states that have racist voter suppression laws.
Yeah, this is where a good sign where crime does actually pay. Last thing I want to get to, because we're being told on the federal level that we can't do anything on the For the People Act unless it's bipartisan, yet we look at these states, very partisan. I mean, here in Pennsylvania, not one vote for House Bill 1300 from the Democrats, and it will be vetoed by the governor. But we're seeing this across the country, yet on the federal level, we've got to be bipartisan. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, bipartisanship, here's what it is. It is not negotiating with terrorists, okay? Like, we're not going to they need to come to the table with us. They need to come to the truth table with Adam Kinzinger and Mitt Romney. And these are far stretches, people that I'd never think I'd be saying this about, Liz Cheney. And it's just, they have to come around to us, because right now they're so far out there. You can't even sit down. I can't sit down with most Republicans just in general, because you have to assume that there's some kind of gotcha moment. They're trying to set you up and do something. And that's like the reality. So when Republicans do request meetings with me to talk about something I'm investigating on them or something along those lines, I can't do it because I don't trust them. And they've done nothing to gain that trust back. They have no remorse for January 6th. They're trying to cover it up and expand the crime. So I think that we're in a lot of trouble right now if they can't come to the middle. But I'll say this again. I think Kinzinger, Cheney, and Romney will be taking over the Republican Party by next year.
I hope you're right. I don't know that I agree, but I sure hope you're right. Rich, your thought?
I think that, the For the People Act, in West Virginia, Democrats, Republicans, Independent, they're all for it. I think what this is showing us is how little our elected officials care about what the people have to say. True. We are, without a shadow of a doubt, 79 to 82% of West Virginians, regardless of party, are for the People Act. We need to do away with gerrymandering. There's a lot of things. Transparency in dark money. That's one of the big things. Is that was one of the deal breakers right there. If it says transparency and dark money, they're not going to be for it because they accept that dark money. Democrats that run for office now say, I will take no corporate PAC money, but you find me anybody that's been in office for more than 10, 15 years, and they all take it. And it's an absolute shame. But what we are seeing is how little the people matter to the people that are in these positions right now in Washington, D.C.
No, it's an excellent point. Eliza, you get the final word on this.
I mean, listen, I think that it's so disgusting that the GOP can continue to purge voter rolls and obstruct democracy, and that, we're not standing up stronger and doing whatever it takes to save our democracy. I think, we bipartisan support is something that, it causes me to roll my eyes. It's this watered down, it's not actually doing what we need it to do. We have to get rid of the filibuster. We have to make sure that we're able to make this progress so that we can save our democracy.
Yeah, sadly, I don't see anything being done on the federal level on the For the People Act, because you got people like Susan Collins, who says that she believes Senate Bill 1 would take away the rights of the people in each of the 50 states to determine which election rules work best for their citizens. You take their rights away, guys.
They're
Scary,
both stiff.
scary times.
It sounds familiar.
It does sound familiar.
Remember, yeah.
But guys, I want to thank you for taking some time for us, sharing your thoughts. Great panel. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Lovely chatting with all of you.
You as well. Again, if you've got any thoughts, any questions, any comments, we'd love to hear your thoughts. If you've got a question for anyone in our all-star panel, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, and we'll make sure that we get that out there. Any issue we talked about, you got questions, comments on, by all means, rick@thericksmithshow.com. You got guest ideas, people you want to see on the panel, as well. We would like to hear the thoughts there. But again, thanks to our panel. Again, interesting week. We didn't get to our Wingnut week in review. There was so much that I wanted to get to. We'll get to it next time. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening